I just want to cover the board game that you're building.
We can do that. Yeah, I'd be
Let's
happy to
talk
talk
about
about
that.
it. Yeah.
How did
Um,
the idea come to you?
the idea to me came from I did so I've always been interested in storytelling, and that's kind of been a big part of my life. I've always been a movie fan. And I've worked in movie production before. And and then I kind of realized that games and video games, I've actually only recently, like a few years ago, I got into video games. And I found that that was actually a really cool mode of storytelling that
Yeah.
I hadn't interacted with before. And not only video games, but just games in general, because you get a different level of immersion when you're actually being rewarded and you actually feel the kind of the consequences of your actions within a story, especially in video games, because video games are often actual stories, that you play through. So I got interested in game design, and I did a course on LinkedIn called Game Design Basics.
Yeah.
Um, Shout out to Imperial Business School for providing us with free access to LinkedIn Learning. Um,
Sick.
yeah, you have to get the plug. Hopefully, I'll get something back from this. This is completely like this is just me advertising the business school. I'm not getting paid for this, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, I would like to get a $10 reduction on my tuition fees if possible. If anyone's listening. Um, but yeah, so I did that course, and one of the exercises was seeing games in everything. Um, and it was really cool, like basically just thinking about regular daily tasks and how you can make a game out of that. And I've always kind of been thinking about it, and I've been doing it kind of subconsciously, but it definitely made me do it more consciously. And one thing that happened was I was taking the tube in London, and you know how the tube map is like a crisscrossing of lines and stations. And I always like to play this game of like, if I go from point A to point B, how do I get there fastest? By taking different lines and switching at different, stations and whatever.
Yeah.
Because there are different times that it takes from one station to the other. And I started thinking like there's not really like a game that's specifically focused on uh there are games for obviously focused on getting from place A to place B, but not necessarily based on how you can get there by combining different lines that take different times to kind of move between stations. And I started thinking, how can I make this into a game? That would be really interesting. Um, and my first thought was, well, this is going to be easy uh, to make a video game out of, because when you're coding a video game, you can basically simulate the time that it takes for you to get between two stations, for example. But then I remembered I don't know how to code. So I figured I'm gonna try and do this as a board game instead. And that turned out to be a challenge because it's very hard to simulate that time aspect on a board game in an analog game. So then I started thinking about other options. And also I didn't want to have it as like a Subway Surfer, because that was the first name I had of the game, which is obviously a very well-known mobile game.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it has to be something else. And I want to tell another story about this with this format. How can I tell a story with this format? So I came up with the name Supernova Racer, and it's a game where you basically have to get from a point A, which is a space station, to point B, which is a supernova, and you're basically playing a as an energy miner. This is long in the future, where you're able to harness the energy of a supernova when it erupts. So you get basically a signal saying you need to get to this supernova as quickly as possible using these space lanes that we've constructed to harness the energy and get back to a space station to sell the energy off as quickly as possible. So
Mm.
that's kind of the premise of the game. And as I said, the time aspect is really hard to do kind of on a board game. So I came up with other mechanisms of simulating that same thing. One of them was, for example, that there are different probabilities of you switching lanes. So that kind of simulates if you take a tube line and it's too late and it doesn't intersect perfectly with the next tube line, you're going to have to wait for another, for the next train. So that's kind of the same thing. You might miss the next space lane, and then you'll have to throw a dice and wait for a turn or whatever to get to the next lane. And then you can, in addition to that, you can sabotage lanes and kind of stop other players from utilizing space lanes or whatever. And
Yeah.
obviously there are other features to this game, but that's the main premise. And yeah, so then I wanted to kind of I started building a game from that, and I actually managed to I built a physical game, and I've had it tested with a few people, and I'm still improving kind of the mechanics of the game. So basically a game, when you build it, you start out with pillars. So the pillars are basically like what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And then you start to think about the mechanics, about the core mechanic of the game, which is that you're using the space lanes, and then the other kind of mechanics that make the game what it is and make you act within the system of the game. And or yeah, and that's now what I've been working on with my testers is how do we make it better? What functions are should we add? What functions are kind of useless, and what functions are annoying? What makes it more enjoyable? What makes it less enjoyable? And it's been really interesting working on this game because it's while I've been very acquainted with game projects before, I haven't actually completed a game of my own before. So doing this has been a really eye-opening experience because I've actually been able to start from nothing to now having a product that's being tested to eventually having a finished game. Personally, like this game it's a personal project, so I will make it better and I will have it as something that I can play with my friends, but it's not necessarily something that I'm aiming to, publish or sell to anyone, because the the old adage in game design is that you won't get better at making games unless you make a lot of games, and you have to make
Hmm.
them really badly as well.
Hmm.
So instead of like starting out by making the game of your dreams, you have to start out by making really random games about really bad topics with really bad mechanics and stories, and then test them and make them better and just make more games. And that's how you get better at it, because then you start to kind of see what mechanics work and what stories work and all these things. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
That is so interesting to me. That is so interesting to me.
It's a lot of fun. I can tell you, like, I recommend this as an exercise for everyone. You're very acquainted with this. So we have the personal innovation development module
Yeah.
in business school, and as an exercise, I think it was uh associating exercise. My challenge was basically to every day think about a random activity that you do during the day and think about how you can make that into a game. It's a really cool way of starting to think about how you can gamify things.
Yeah.
And I mean, in some cases, you're not only coming up with games, you're actually coming up with things, with improvements to processes that you
Yeah.
you have in daily life. But it's also a really fun way to look at the world. Is like, how can I make washing dishes into a game, you
Yeah.
know, and stuff like that.
That is such a great exercise. I'm gonna
It
note
is,
that.
it's a lot of fun. I recommend you doing it.
I shall do it. That sounds so interesting. I'm kind of kicking myself why I didn't think of that.
Yeah, it's funny because like I wouldn't have thought of it had I not taken a very specific approach to all the exercises where I wanted to improve my kind of game development skills and creative
Yeah.
writing skills and kind of that specific skill set, like I wouldn't have thought about it otherwise, especially as a questioning exercise. Like I think what all of us kind of thought about immediately was like, how can we combine two specific objects to make a better object? But then that process can be made more or less specific to create really interesting exercises in a lot of different ways.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, game design was just something that I thought about.
Can I pitch an idea to you?
Go ahead.
And if you're interested, you know what? Both of us can work on it together.
Got a deal. Yeah.
And so when we started doing the design thinking and personal innovation development modules, we did a lot of games. If you remember the first module we had, Michelle Rogan, who's our professor for personal innovation, she gave us two sheets with different objects on each sheet, and then she said just pick one object from each sheet at random and try and associate. If you were to combine them, what new value could you create? You remember that?
Yes.
And so basically whatever I remembered, the crux of whatever she told us after the exercise in the debrief session, the gist was that these exercises that she's making us do are all aimed at making you creative, all aimed at institutionalizing or giving you a framework to be creative, right? And so I started thinking, is there a way to gamify design thinking? Is there a way to gamify creative thinking? It could be breaking it into small games like the one you just suggested. Well, as in, is there like a deck of cards that you could make that would force a person to think creatively or think from design principles? I mean, if I had such a game, like I really enjoyed playing that game that she made us play with the two objects, and I would totally play that at a party if I was having dinner with a few friends. I think that'd be a great party game. So, gamifying design thinking. What do you think?
I absolutely love that idea. And you know what? There, like, now that you said it, like, there is actually a game that's quite like this in terms of like the association kind of with the association mechanic, which is Cards Against Humanity. Have you ever played that?
I have not played that, but I know of it.
Yeah, but you've
Yeah.
heard of it. Yeah. So it's basically like you have a sentence with a blank or two blanks, and you have 5 or 6 cards in your hand with a specific word, and
Yeah.
you're supposed to basically put in the word that you think will make the funniest sentence.
Yeah.
And it's like, in a way, it's kind of the same mechanic, right? Where you're combining two things to make something, better and creating more value. And in this case, it's humor. But I think it's actually a really good idea that you do it in a different way, where you might have like objects or something, because you really have to like, it kind of widens your perspective. Um, because having two objects and putting them together, I think the possibilities from that are more generated by the person themselves than the game. For example, in Cards Against Humanity, you get a set of answers that you can give, right? So
Yeah.
it kind of already restricts the way you
Yeah.
think, because you're already thinking about only those words and which one of those words would be funniest.
Yeah.
So that's actually a great idea. I love that. Did you look at the IDEO cards that we were uh kind
That's
of
how I got the idea.
is that like is
That's
that the
how
game?
when no 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 no.
No.
The IDEO cards basically each card talks about a specific design principle.
Right.
It's
Okay.
basically like a memorization flashcard type of a thing.
Right. Right. Okay.
But once Sankalp mentioned the IDEO cards, and
Yeah.
I'd already been thinking of the design thinking as a game, it struck me, why isn't this like a party game, like a deck
Yeah.
of cards that you can play, right?
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
We need to make this into a game.
Let's do it.
Actually, because
Let's do
like
it.
this is a really fun game. So like me and my girlfriend studies design right now, and she actually what we decided to make a finished version of Cards Against Humanity that
Yeah.
we're gonna give our friends this
Dude,
Christmas.
that is going to kill because my friend gifted me this thing called Cards Against Sanskar, which
Mhm.
is the Indian version of Cards Against Humanity.
It's so funny
I
because
I
yeah,
couldn't figure out how to play it, so it's just lying in my stuff. But I know it's a big deal. Like
yeah.
lots of people love it.
Yeah. But I think like because now that we're kind of doing it, we know the process of making that card game.
Yeah,
So we should make that your idea into a game. I love that. I think that's really good.
good.
Because not only is it funny and it's fun, but it actually helps you think, you know?
Yeah,
So it can be used as an educational tool. So whenever you're playing a drinking game with your association cards, you can kind of tell people that you're learning, and you're getting better.
yeah. I feel like though it would just be nerds like you and I playing the game because everyone else is going to be like, no, we just want to drink. We just want to have fun. Why?
Absolutely not. I totally disagree with you. I think we're gonna make this into like a huge game. You
Yeah,
know,
all right. Let's
Cards
do it.
Against Humanity was a game for nerds, and I think everyone plays it now, right? So like, I think we can like this is because it's such a universal mechanic and it's a universal thing. Everyone thinks about it. Like everyone thinks about how can I don't know. I mean, and you can even have it like in different kind of combinations where you have two objects and you have to make that into something else. But you can also have an object and a specific verb or
Yeah.
like like a use, and then how would you use this object to do this thing? Or how would you improve this object to do this thing? There are many different mechanics that you can use there.
All right. I have no idea about the technical aspects of gamification. That's your area. I'm going to be your ideas man. And let's sit down next week and come up with something.
We should. Yeah.
I'd love to work together on this. All
Yeah,
right. We have a business idea. The first business idea coming out of the pod.
that's
Is this
perfect.
not a success
Yeah.
already? I sure think so.
Yeah. Even if you wouldn't make a single episode after this, you've already like we've now
Be
created
worth it.
something.
It
Yeah.
would be worth it. And the next person I bring on the pod, they better have at least three business ideas for me, or
The bar
otherwise,
is now here.
the bar is
So
now
yeah.
the bar is now right here. Like it's
Oh, it is? Okay. Amazing. So now we have like, yeah. Actually that could be a good challenge for you with like, can you come up with a new business idea for each guest that you have on the podcast? Because obviously everyone is an entrepreneur and an innovator and a disruptor from our course. So you should just, play this game and try and come up with business ideas with each person.
it's yeah, absolutely. Um, Last question before I let you go. Where are you going to be in the next 15 years, Max?
That is an excellent question. I am going to be wait, how far is 15 years? Well, hopefully I'm going to
15
be
years, you'd hopefully have been like you would have had a couple of goals in the Olympics already. You would have been
yeah, I was just gonna say
times.
I think after 15 years I'll hopefully be a retired Olympian. But in addition to that, I think I will be heading a video game studio as a game designer. And whether it be a game that's based on a story that I've written or a game that's based on a story that I absolutely love, it's gonna be a killer RPG. Let me tell you this.
All right. Well,
So
you've put your flag in the ground.
we've
Um,
put two flags in the ground now.
put two flags in the
Oof,
ground now.
a lot of
Yeah,
pressure.
lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But I'm going to link back to this video in 15 years, and we're going to celebrate. We'll have a drink then.
I think I will too. I'll rewind this video each year on New Year's Eve and remind myself of where I'm going.
Yeah,
That's
cool.
perfect.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, Max. This was great. This is the longest episode till date. 2 hours.
As I said, I've done podcasts before and they've all been really long. So and I'm so grateful that you asked me on this pod. It was a blast. It was really
I'm
nice
grateful
talking
you
to you.
came on, man. This was so interesting. You've lived a very interesting life.
I've done some interesting stuff every now and then. I
Yeah.
hope I try to keep things interesting.
Oh yeah. For sure, for sure. All right. Have a good rest of the weekend back home and see you in uni next week.
As for you, I'll see you next week, and let's sit down and plan our hit game.
Let's do that.
Amazing.
Cool. See ya.
Well, I'll
Take
talk to you
care.
later. Bye.
Bye bye.